The only real God is the one that you believe in. Start looking for the God in others. And if you find you're tuning into a wave, well then I don't know much about being saved.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, friends.
Welcome into another episode of Spiritual Philosochat with the Joneses. I'm Danny Jones.
And I am Samantha Jones.
And here we are, episode 128.
128.
What are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about Atlantis.
I love this one.
Yeah, this was fun.
We've mentioned it in some past ones, but never kind of devoted some time to it.
Yeah.
So, cool.
For sure.
I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
Well, before we hop into that, you got anything you want to share from last week?
I do. So last week we did Mysteries of Bigfoot and Loch Ness. And I've been doing readings every week on the show now. And so I wanted to read Tina's response to her reading from last week.
Go.
She said, "So I just listened to your newest podcast. I'm crying. Thank you so much for answering not only one, but two of my questions." Because we answered her question and the questions, and then I did the reading for her. "I truly appreciate you and Danny for creating a safe space for me to learn and feel normal. Your reading completely resonated with me. As you know, this journey isn't the easiest, and I truly appreciate the advice you have given."
Nice.
Yeah, so thank you, Tina.
Thanks, Tina.
Yeah, I'm
Appreciate
glad that it resonated for you, for sure.
Thanks for participating with us.
Yes, absolutely. And then for our questions for this week, the first one is from Melissa. She said, all my life I've had dreams I lived in the mountains. My dad was from Colorado, so we visited every few years. I always felt like I belonged there. I was lucky enough to live there for 2 years. Now, when I go for a few years without being in the mountains, I feel the need to be there. When I get there, I actually feel my body relax. My question is, do you actually belong in certain places, or could I be remembering a past life? I think that's a great question.
Yeah, that's pretty...
I think there could be a lot of things going on.
Yeah, I was going to say, you might have hit on a couple things.
Yeah, exactly. Could it be past life? Absolutely. You know, if you go somewhere, like we went to the Getty Museum once, and we were going through this Egyptian area, and there was a tomb, and I started like feeling really weird, like really, really drawn to this, almost like that feeling of like home. So I think that that's because I lived in Egypt, you know, during that period. That's my assumption for that. But also there's nostalgia. You know, this is where you grew up. This is where you have a lot of memories. It brings back those things, and that's like feeling home. We just recently moved back to the town that I grew up in, and there is a feeling of being settled and happy and relaxed here. Yeah, that's different than any place that I felt, because it is home. It has that feeling to it, you know. Right. So you could be feeling that as well.
That's true. Yeah. And the other thing too is, I think Mother Nature itself can exude energy that will give you that feeling.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So there's been times where I started after the spiritual awakening, kind of thinking more about how we're one, and how we are all connected. And when I say all, I mean every living thing, down to the rocks and the trees and the birds and everything. I started kind of connecting to that idea a lot more, and so we would go to particular places where we would hike or go for walks, and there would be around us a lot of really, really old white oak trees. Yeah. And there's a grove of them in this area called Corriganville Ranch, where they used to film movies back in the 40s and the 50s, maybe even earlier. And there's a grove of them there, and I could start to feel them.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I had been in this grove many, many times in my life, and I never paid attention to it. I went to the Sequoias many years ago with like TK and some other people, and I remember feeling really drawn to the trees, but I didn't feel that energy.
Yeah, yeah.
I would love to go there now.
Yeah.
But definitely I can feel the vibration when I stand in this grove of oak trees. I can feel this, the air almost feels thick.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's this vibration, this frequency going on. It's actually brought me to tears before.
Yeah.
Like where I've needed it so bad. I actually thought about that today. I need to get when it cools off.
Yes.
There, you know?
Absolutely.
So that's another thing that you
Very
could have
good
been
point.
experiencing as well.
Very good point, especially, going through this, she's kind of going through a spiritual journey as well, and when, you're on that and you do start to experience those things, absolutely, you start to feel nature in a different way, so that could be it, absolutely, but never discount, anything, really. There could be so many reasons why you feel that way, but something that you could do next time you're out there is just sit really quietly to yourself at one point, and just let whatever comes come to you, and just kind of let your own thoughts go, like meditating, and just see what comes.
Right.
See what comes in. If you feel anything like, whoa, I saw something, I saw a flash of me sitting in these mountains, when there was nothing here, or, you know what I mean? You never know what you might get.
This is true.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah. That's a good question.
Yeah,
I like
thank
that
you
one.
for that, Melissa. That was a fun one.
Thank you, Melissa.
And then this one is from Ashley. She says, has Danny always been so supportive and open to your abilities? How does it affect or make your marriage different? I think that, yes, he's always been supportive. I didn't tell him about my animal abilities until probably a year or so into our relationship, which was before the spiritual awakening. And you didn't, run or anything. I think at that point you knew me well enough that I wasn't going to lie to you about something like that.
I
What I mean?
know the extent of what you meant by communication.
Yeah.
I just knew you were. I used to tease you and call you the Beastmaster.
And Dionne Warwick, and
I would envision you like Ace Ventura, walking into the room and extending your arms out, and all these animals and birds land on you.
So
I knew you definitely had this ability to connect with them. I didn't know until you could communicate with people in my life that I've lost that you never knew.
Yeah.
Then I really understood, okay, she really is communicating.
Yeah.
With these animals.
But he's been very supportive, absolutely, and has been on this journey with me, and that's been very helpful. And I talk to a lot of people that aren't as lucky, they open this up themselves, or they're already going through this when they meet the person. But for us, that's what has been meant to happen, is this is our spiritual journey together. So we were brought together to experience this together. So he's on the same spiritual journey that I am. And not that our marriage was bad before, because it wasn't, but this has helped us tremendously. It's helped us to see what we're really supposed to be like, what we're supposed to enjoy, how a marriage is supposed to be. And that's helped me, I think both of us, to work on a different level with each other and see things differently.
I agree. Yeah. I think the bottom line, I think for me, is that none of us can really give love and maybe even receive love from other people until we can really learn to accept ourselves somewhat. And this is a process of growing and changing and evolving, and this takes your lifetime to do. So it doesn't happen overnight, and then one day you're good and everything's great from then on out. I mean, this is life. It's about experience. But what this has done for our marriage started with what it did for us individually.
Yes.
It made us want to do things different. Things that we were doing in our lives, we wanted to try to be conscious of and try to do them different.
Yes.
And by that, I mean, whatever it is, meaning, try to curb your frustration, or eat better, or communicate, more thoroughly.
Yeah.
Those kind of things. Be a better human.
Yeah.
And what that does is it's now instilling your own self-respect. And then it makes it possible for you to facilitate that towards somebody else.
Absolutely, it does.
And then give them respect and love. So it's by all means strengthened it.
Yes. I think so. Absolutely. The other side has, and this whole experience has been like a built-in marriage counselor, because when we have arguments, I will hear afterwards, you should have done this differently, or maybe next time, this or whatever. Or after an argument, my mom might say, okay, so you need to go and approach him in this way. And, she gives me tips and helps me, and it's really has been very helpful. And, it's like having having a third party, but the words just come out of my mouth. Things that I never would have thought about, to help build our relationships. So I think this spiritual journey, if you can take it with your significant other, it can be a beautiful journey. It doesn't mean it's perfect. Like Danny said, it's
you're still human.
You're learning,
we're
absolutely.
Still coexisting. You get irritated. You have a pet peeve.
Yeah.
You're still human.
Yeah, exactly.
It just changes the way that we want to process some of our thoughts and our feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we both came from different relationships, and this isn't like those.
No, not at all.
So we had to relearn that first, and then relearn everything else we were thinking and, believed in a lot of senses. On top of that, once that came along, because we were already together once this started happening.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest parts of the spiritual journey, but us coming together in it, like you said, is having to work on ourselves. You have to accept the fact that you have faults. And once you start accepting the fact that you have faults, you can see things differently. And that's what the spiritual awakening has really done for me, as it's opened my eyes to my own faults. Not to the faults of the world and other people, but to my own faults.
Right.
And that's hard to take, But for people that don't have a supportive spouse, I think if you take this journey and you keep going and they see the changes in you, that it just makes them want to change. When people are around you, like, it becomes contagious.
Yeah.
Exactly. So don't ever give up if you can't, if your spouse isn't supportive, because there's always that chance that they're going to come on board.
Yeah. And the truth really is that no matter whether you're married or single, we are all on our own individual path. This is our life.
Yes.
And as far as we're concerned, this is the only one we're living right now.
Right.
So you're here for a reason to make the best of it. I'm not telling you, to leave this person or whatever if they're not supporting you. But the ultimate goal is for you to live a life of happiness.
Yes.
And fulfillment.
And you make a really good point there, because this question is about support. And when you love somebody and you care about somebody, you support what they want to do. I mean, obviously, not if they're murdering somebody, but if they want to be on a spiritual journey and you love them, then even if you don't agree with it, you let them be on their spiritual journey. I mean, music is your thing. I would never try and hold you back from that. That's your thing. I support you in that 100%, just like you do with me. And that's the way a marriage should be. And if there's anything less than that, then it should be examined, really. Yeah. Because you should, like you said, you have to be happy. Yeah. And supporting each other is a big part of that. It's not a competition. In a marriage, the last thing you should be doing is competing with your spouse, know?
Yeah. No.
So
you're a team.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope that answered your question, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
Tendency to go off a little bit, but it always works. Okay, and then Shauna, I'm going to do a reading for.
Shauna.
Yes. So we've talked about Shauna a little bit, and she is a new listener, kind of new listener, but I have known Shauna for a couple of years now. I met her through my job at Shine, and we have become friends, and now she is on a spiritual journey here, and my mom has started working with her, and it's the weirdest thing. All of a sudden, she's seeing Linda, but my mom's really good at that,
Right.
So we're kind of working together. So she asked for this reading about her uncle, and so I wanted to see if we can bring her uncle in to this, because if my mom's working with Shauna, maybe we can bring uncle in and start working with him as well.
Oh, I see.
So that was kind of my goal with this reading. Right. So she said, "This is my Uncle Andy. If chosen, I'd like to know if he has anything to say or anything he wants me to know. I haven't had a dream visit from him in years."
Has she before, though?
Sounds like it, yeah.
Seeing Uncle Andy?
Yeah.
Hi, Uncle Andy. He's young.
Yeah, young. Yeah. Okay. So, I don't know if we've talked about Uncle Andy before. I think vaguely, but I don't really remember. But what he's showing me right now is a really good sense of humor, but kind of like a dry one. Like, what he's showing me is him sitting there and, like, throwing out a joke and, like, looking around waiting for people to get the joke, because it's kind of like under the radar.
Thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And he's looking around, like, did anybody get that joke? I thought it was funny. Maybe it just went over their heads, So that's kind of what he's showing me at first. I'm feeling like I don't know if it's that he's the uncle on your father's side, or if he was more like a father to you than an uncle, but I'm feeling like this was a positive male influence in your life, and it's really sad that he's gone already, because I feel like this could have been a good influence for you here. And when I say a good influence, I mean more like he would have been a good person to talk to. Like when you're going through things, he's a good person to bounce ideas off of. He wasn't judgmental. He just kind of wanted to be there and listen and be a friend, and wasn't, trying to throw his own opinions into things. So he apologizes for not physically being here. However, Shauna is opening her abilities big time.
That's cool.
And will soon be able to hear Uncle Andy very clearly. So he wants you to know that when you have little pinches, like you feel like maybe a sharp poke, or like somebody's pinching you, that's him. He's trying to get your attention. She's been having a lot of ear ringing, and that's very common. If you have ringing in your left ear especially, that's a spirit trying to come in. But he's telling me that he doesn't use that. He uses more the physical, trying to like poke you and physically. So when you feel that, he says that's him. He is working side by side with other spirits to help open your abilities. In this right now, what they are asking you to do, number one, is to realize that people do not have to understand what's going on with you for it to be actually what's happening. He doesn't want you to be discouraged if the people around you are discouraging you, because you know what's actually going on here. And you know that you have these abilities and that you're building them. And so this is very important. He says this is the message that he's here to tell you today, is that this is your journey. It's your spiritual journey. You have the ability to tell people, I'm not going to do this with you. And that's a big part of the lesson here too, is like, I saw something today that said a spiritual person, you know what, I have it here. I'm going to read it to you because I think that it's important. When you deeply hurt a spiritual person, they don't hate you, they nothing you. Hate is a word that I don't really use. Right. If somebody has hurt me, they're just a part of my experience. You know what I mean? If somebody doesn't agree with me, they're just a part of my experience. And that's what they're trying to teach you, is everybody here is a part of your story. And learning how to deal with these people is what's going to help you along on this spiritual journey. So you have to have confidence in yourself and not let these people take you down. So that is the biggest message from Uncle Andy. He's very proud of you. He's proud that you're continuing on this journey, and he loves to watch when you get bubbly, when something happens, like when she recognizes something spiritually and she gets really excited. That's like his favorite. It raises his vibration when she does that. Yeah. So he's showing me it makes him like go higher into the clouds, higher. He just loves it. So So when you do that, when you have those silly little giggles and you're all like excited, Uncle Andy's there.
That's cool.
Yeah. So
nice.
So there's Uncle Andy for Shauna.
Very cool. Thanks,
Yay.
Shauna.
Thanks, Shauna and Uncle Andy.
Yeah, Uncle Andy.
And before we finish up, I just wanted to say, because we had talked about it for so long, that the Gypsy Brown show did happen a couple of days ago. Yes. And it was absolutely amazing.
It was a great time.
It was. And we appreciate everybody that came out, and those of you that lived far away and couldn't and sent your support. It was, yeah.
It was. Thank you. Thank you for everybody. Again, the club, Zach, Fee Waybill and the boys and Tubes. Everybody. Yeah. All the people that showed up. It was just a good time.
You know what? I just want to take a second to talk about something psychic real quick here, because this was an experience for me too, the show. I have a tendency to draw cards in the morning to see how my day is going to go. And every once in a while, it'll show me something I don't want to see. And I kept asking about the show, and the tower kept coming up. And see, I'm not really a card reader. I'm still really, really learning how to read cards. I just use them kind of as tools. And so I was drawing the tower and other things coming up with it. And I was panicking. I'm like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen here? And I like intuitively kept trying to connect to it. Like, okay, what is it? And I wasn't feeling like one moment. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and I kept asking, like, are they not going to perform? Is something going to happen? Is one of the members going to get Rona and we can't, there's not going to be a show?
Right.
Well, and I was freaking myself out. And I asked another psychic medium to look at it, Nisha, and Nisha actually called me out on it. She's like, why do you keep doing this to yourself on the same question? She said, the definition of insanity is repeating the same behavior and expecting different results. And you know what?
Yeah.
I thanked her so much for calling me out on it.
Yeah.
But I knew intuitively it was, and I told you this several times, it's just going to be a bunch of little things that are going to push your buttons. And that's exactly what it was.
Right.
But because that tower kept coming up, I was like, I was paranoid.
Right.
So this really showed me that that tower is not always what I think it is.
Yeah.
And I need to be careful about drawing these cards. And so I'm telling this story, even though it's embarrassing, because I feel like if you guys are out there working with cards and you're experiencing the same things, just know that, those cards don't always mean what we think they do.
Yeah, don't look at them like in a literal, if you get the death card, it's not going to be death,
Yeah. And the day before, it was fire weather here. It was horrible
Yeah.
fire. And I was like, the tower, fire weather,
Yeah.
the tower. Is it going to be a fire? Really driving myself
I'd asked
crazy.
you to pull cards for me so I could get a sense of what it would be like, and that was coming up
And they came up, yeah.
multiple times, and I was like, okay.
Yep.
But you know what? In some way, it was good. It prepared me. It kind of toughened my skin. And look, all I can say is what happened, we'll just call it showbiz.
Yeah, that's exactly what
All right?
it was.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
It's called showbiz.
It wasn't a big
Sometimes
deal,
it doesn't go as smoothly as planned, but we still performed. It was still a wonderful turnout.
Oh, yeah.
And it sounded really good.
It was great.
So-
yeah. And honestly, that's what the cards were saying. It was just that as soon as I saw that tower come up, I was like, can I put it back in? And then it would pop back out. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But, that's cards for you. And if you really don't know how to put the cards together, like I have no idea when I draw like two cards, if they go together, if they have meaning together. I don't know this.
Right.
So I'm just making myself crazy. And I'm sure there's others out there that do that. So you're not alone. I think what I learned with this is to always come back to my intuition. What does my intuition tell me? And my intuition kept telling me it's just going to be a bunch of little things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, showbiz.
Yeah.
So
But it was still a success.
it was a huge success. Yeah.
And it was, on some level, a test for me. My abilities and patience and compassion and understanding. And
yes, for sure.
and that all went great. So
It did. It did. It was great. So.
awesome. Well,
So-
thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I have from last week.
Beautiful.
Great.
All right, then. Well, episode 128, Atlantis.
Atlantis. I don't know about you, but for me, I try to go into these subjects, especially if I don't know much about them, without any kind of judgment, without this is real or this is fake. I just want to know the facts. I want to know the possibilities, and I'll make a determination for myself. But I found it very interesting that when I went to do this research, almost every single site that it comes up on says fictional island, fictional place. And I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't think it was so fictional.
No.
We watched, what was that on Discovery Plus or Netflix? I can't remember. But I think it was Discovery Plus. We watched something about Atlantis, the search for Atlantis. And, all these shows are pretty much the same. They're interesting because you get to see a lot of old artifacts and whatnot. But for the most part, they're anticlimactic because nobody has actually found it yet.
And that's what makes it fiction.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, the shows are kind of like, we're going on a tour around the globe at different locations,
Yeah.
and get to see different underwater sites and
Yeah.
other things too. But yeah, I mean, it's because they can't find it. It's fiction.
Right.
Or it's a thing of what we would call legend or folklore.
Yes.
But I again go back to this thing in my mind that says these stories have been around for, well, we're going to go with what the theory is, and that's relatively, what is it? Like 4,000 years before Egypt?
Yeah.
So about 9,000 years?
9,000. I want to say it was 9,000 BC.
Okay, not 9,000 years. 9,000.
9,000 BC.
BC,
I
okay.
think, yeah.
So anyways, it's much earlier. And you start to think about when you hear that term, old wise men.
Yeah.
And elders.
Right.
And, before there was books and computers and things for us to store knowledge, these were the people that held the knowledge.
Right.
They passed it down from generation to generation.
Right.
So the story wouldn't die.
Right.
But there is a reason why I feel like these publications are calling it fiction. And we'll get into that later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we forget just how much time, and I mention this often, this earth has been here, okay? So, but let's put into perspective 9,000 years ago. I'm 44 years old. I would have to live this life, this 44-year-old life, 204 times in order to be an equivalent of how long it's been. I'm sorry, is that 2004? I did the math wrong. Either way, it doesn't matter. It's a lot.
Long time.
It's a lot. Okay. I'd have to live a lot of lifetimes. Yeah. 204. And that's a lot of time. And you think about what's happened in the short span of your life, because the age range of who's listening to us, I'm going to say is probably between 20 and 70 would be my guess. Okay. So just think of what a long amount of time that has felt like to you. And then think of, multiplying that. There is so much possibility of what actually happened on this planet that many years ago. And to think that there would be, major things left sitting out for us to find is really kind of silly.
Incredible.
Yeah. So first, I asked our listeners how many of them believe that Atlantis is real. That it's not fiction, and 68% said that they believe it's real. Now, nobody said that they don't believe it's real, but 32% said that they're not sure.
Sure.
So let's talk about it.
Okay.
So like I always do, I usually go to Wikipedia first just to see what they have to say about things. And
what did they say?
I only put the first line because I was like, I'm walking away from this.
In capitals. Not real.
Not real. So Atlantis is a fictional island mentioned in one of Plato's pieces of work, Timaeus and Critias, I believe is what it's called. I just stopped there because I was like, you just said
Plato's
it was fictional.
One of the most worldly renowned philosophers and educated, smart person.
Yes.
That most of what he's written about is true and has been proven true.
He has written some fiction, but see, here's the thing: is a writer's a writer.
Sure.
And it doesn't mean that they're always going to write fiction or they're always going to write nonfiction. So, he wrote fiction, but he also was very smart and very into, human and our thought process and everything. So he wrote...
And the stars and stuff.
And so he wrote nonfiction as well. But this is what Nat Geo said. They said... If the writing of the ancient Greek philosopher Plato had not contained so much truth about the human condition, his name would have been forgotten long ago. I was like, what? Come on. But one of the most famous stories was the cataclysmic destruction of the ancient civilization of Atlantis. And it says, which is almost completely false. Is what they said on National Geographic.
Almost completely. So there is a hint of they're not sure that it might be true?
Could be. But why is it not true? Why? Because we haven't found it. Like you said, it's like, Okay, so Plato told the story of Atlantis around 360 BC. The founders of Atlantis, he said, were half god, half human, also known as demigods. Demigods are just basically like Jesus would be considered a demigod.
They know how to do things with their mind.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay. They created a utopian civilization and became the great naval power. Their home was made up of concentric islands separated by wide moats and linked by a canal that penetrated to the center. So every picture that I've seen of it's like this big round island
circles
with other circles inside circles. That's a great way of putting it. The lush islands contain gold, silver, and other precious metals and supported an abundance of rare and exotic wildlife. There are theories about where Atlantis was, such as in the Mediterranean off the coast of Spain, or even under what is now Antarctica. That's the biggest problem. The biggest question is, where is it? If it does exist, where is it?
That's true because, I mean, geologically, the Earth is moving. Continents that were continents then are not continents now.
Exactly.
Like the United States of America used to be at the bottom of the seafloor
Right.
at one time. So things are getting pushed up and sunk down and vice versa. And we don't know what was what
Exactly.
9,000 years ago.
Yeah, things have totally changed. Totally changed. So it's really hard. I can understand. How do you find something like that?
Ruins is the biggest deal, but that's what's so kind of convincing for me on some levels is that there are other civilizations that we have found evidence of these civilizations underwater.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when we watch these shows, they do find a lot of interesting things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
man-made things.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember there was one that we watched that had like something where they would attach the boats to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what I'm talking about? It was like, it looked like a port almost,
Like a stone.
Like where they would attach the boats to. I don't. It was one of the Atlantis
It had like
things
a
we watched.
hole in it.
Yeah, exactly.
It was like a hole where you'd throw the rope.
Exactly. Yeah.
And somebody actually carved that hole in that stone.
Yeah.
To throw the rope through.
Mm-hmm. So the legend of Atlantis is a story about a moral, spiritual people who lived in a highly advanced utopian civilization. But they became greedy, petty, and morally bankrupt. The gods became angry because the people had lost their way and turned to immoral pursuits. As punishment, the gods sent fire and earthquakes to sink Atlantis into the sea. So that's the story of Atlantis, in a nutshell, what they believe. Okay?
Right.
Plato added that the city under the sea was located somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. So something that we did today that I'm glad that we did is we listened to 2 chapters of Convoluted Universe Book 1 by Dolores Cannon that talked about Atlantis.
There's a few chapters in Book 1 of Atlantis.
Was there more than just the 2 we listened to?
I think there...
Oh, yeah, there was another one.
There was another one we didn't hear, and I don't know if there one was beyond that. But then in Convoluted Universe Book 2, there is Escaping Atlantis, so that's where they talk more about what caused this disappearance.
Yeah, we didn't get to all of it, which is fine because there was so much already to absorb. But the thing about Dolores Cannon is that if there's anyone that I believe with the research that she's done, this is who it would be. And I know a lot of our listeners have. Our highest listened to episode was our Dolores Cannon episode. So I'm sure a lot of you right now have heard Convoluted Universe 1, these chapters. But let's talk about them a little bit. Let's talk about what Dolores believes this is, because we don't know.
Right.
I know that when we started listening to this, I started having flashes of things. And so when we go down some of these things, I'll tell you what the flashes I was seeing, because I was seeing before she even said anything on these subjects.
Right.
But one of the first things that she said was that not everyone perished. So when Atlantis, whatever happened to it, if it sunk or was a volcano or whatever, there were people that knew it was coming and they had fled the area.
Yes.
So not everyone
Can we just pause there 1 second?
Yes.
And that is, let's think even earlier than Atlantis.
Okay.
There, and in Dolores's conversations in these chapters, she gets into those questions. What about before Atlantis?
Okay.
Everybody's so focused on Atlantis because that would prove there was something before the Egyptians. And as far as we're concerned, that seems to be the most ancient civilization that we can come up with, right?
Yeah.
Egyptians, Mayans, and things like that, but mainly the Egyptians. Atlantis is apparently 4,000 years before that. She's asking even before.
Yeah.
And he's saying there's been many... The people she's using in these past life regressions and putting under hypnosis, she's asking these questions to.
Yes.
They're either connecting in their past life at the moment, or they're allowing a spirit to connect and communicate through them.
Yes.
So she's asking these questions. They're saying there's been many can I have help with that word?
Cataclysmic?
Cataclysmic
Tough one,
events, even before Atlantis, where civilizations have perished, but some have survived, and that is the essence of our nature.
Yes.
So this, and continents have sunk and risen even before Atlantis.
Yes. Absolutely.
So Atlantis itself is descendants from other things that have happened.
again, just because we don't see the proof of it doesn't mean it wasn't there. It's so long ago. This stuff is buried in the earth, buried in the ocean. You know, it doesn't mean that it wasn't around. It just means it was a long time ago.
Right.
So through when she does these past life regressions, and was she talking to a spirit? Do you remember if she was in this one? Was she? I don't remember if she was talking to a spirit.
She is talking to a spirit, and she's also using a gentleman named Philip, I believe.
Yeah.
She worked with him for several years,
right, Philip.
On and off, doing regression sessions with him, recording
Yes,
them.
That's right, Philip. Yes. Okay. So some other things that came out is that Atlantis was not a single continent or place. It was actually a civilization that was spread very wide. It was just the inner part, I believe, is what they considered to be.
It was actually Earth's original name. Was Atlantis. It was the globe was considered Atlantis. This was like the epicenter of civilization. There were other small, somewhat technologically advanced civilizations, but they had no names. They had no need for it.
Right.
Because they didn't have some sort of government that we would think of that needed to have that in a database.
Right. Yes.
But Atlantis was the one that had the name.
Yep. It existed for thousands of years. It wasn't just 100 years. It was a long time.
Long time.
They were the highest technologically advanced civilization. I believe they said even more so than us.
To date.
Yeah, to date, absolutely. And yeah, they were slightly ahead of the other civilizations at that time, but the other ones were pretty technologically advanced as well. People there were good people. They were emotionally and physically healthy. For the most part, she said when Atlantis first began, people there had reddish blonde hair, some with brown, but mostly reddish blonde, light olive complexion, and green hazel eyes. But then later on, it started becoming more and more diverse, like we have now. And there were more blondes and people with dark black hair, and they were taller. And so it just started becoming more and more diverse. There wasn't, so because they asked, like, is there a specific look that these people have? And one thing that the man kept saying is they're so pretty.
Right.
They're so pretty. It was a beautiful civilization. They knew how to take care of themselves. We'll get into that more, but that was very important to them. Something that I thought was so cool, and this was where I had one of my epiphanies today, was we watch a lot of these shows, and they show all the time that these civilizations use stone. And they look, their homes and their... what would you call it? Their towns and stuff.
Structures.
Yeah, exactly.
Just in general.
They're all rock. And I always thought, well, if they were so sophisticated, why did they use this? And my head exploded when this man said that they used it because these things were closer to the earth. When you use fake materials, you're not getting the energy from the earth.
The more processed the material is from the time it's dug up from the earth, the less energy it will contain by the time it's done. So the more they could just leave it as is, the more it's going to do what it's really supposed to do.
Yep, exactly. And this blew my mind because it made me realize that, wow, it didn't matter that their homes weren't, on the outside stucco like ours.
Right.
It made sense. It totally makes sense. It blew my mind a little bit. Another thing that was really cool is that they used energy and manipulated it. So they could actually bend stone. And you could probably explain this better than me. But I was like, whoa.
Well, not only were these people extremely healthy and took care of their bodies, but they were very spiritual community.
Yes.
Okay? To the point where if outsiders tried to come in, there was no use for telephones and computers. Everything was done telepathically. They could speak to someone across town, someone across the globe, someone on another planet.
Yes.
All their decisions based on the community itself and the city were done telepathically. It saved a lot of time in like red tape, what we would consider like governmental red tape. It took people's consent, essentially. And people would be informed, they give their consent. So they're very connected spiritually.
Yes.
This allows them this understanding of this world we live in at a much greater level than we understand it. You and I just walking down the street. Maybe not scientists, but even more than scientists.
Right.
They're able to manipulate molecular structures
Yes.
within objects. So say there's a stone that they want to use for, and they used stone for not only walls, but they use it for furniture.
Right.
Because it's self-insulating. Some of these stones, which appeared as stones, were actually crystals.
Yes.
And this is another thing that they were able to manipulate the molecular structure of, was crystals as well. So if there was a stone that was kind of wedged and they couldn't get it out, they could essentially, with their mind, go in and change the molecular structure of this stone and make it pliable like clay.
Amazing.
And pull it out. They didn't have to pull it out. They used levitation.
Yes.
Okay? This is another thing where they talk about where the history or the legend of flying magic carpets come from. Comes from Atlantis, not from Egypt. So this was levitation. This is how they built massive structures with massive stones. This is how the pyramids were built.
Yes.
It wasn't tens of thousands of people being whipped in the hot sun every day
No.
to drag up a megaton block of granite up to the pinnacle top of a pyramid. That's not how it happened. They've never been able to prove that's how it happened.
No.
That's all speculation. So they're manipulating. They're able to do things with their mind.
Yes.
That's what made these people what we would call demigods.
Right.
Not everybody in this town could do that.
No.
They could all communicate telepathically. They were all very spiritual, and they were good people.
Yes.
The higher ups, what we would consider priests or monks or things like that, those were the people that could do this type of stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because before she started talking about the stones and the levitation and all that, what I saw was this was a vision I had, was a group of people around a very large stone and them all focusing their energy and levitating the stone. So this I saw before she even mentioned it. So this to me, because I had that vision before this,
They're telling you it's real.
absolutely they're telling me it's real. Yeah. And it makes so much sense because we've watched so many things too on the pyramids and I sit there and I go, how did they do that? How did they do it with levitation? Duh. You know, why is it so hard to believe?
And a lot of
Because
the way
we
they
can't do
shaped
it.
these things.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
We don't understand how when you look at some of the pyramids and the way that these blocks, like not a drop of water could seep through them. The seam between two blocks that weigh thousands and thousands of tons. No.
Right.
That wasn't chiseled away by hand.
No.
You know, all day long for 10 years. It just, sorry.
Yeah. No. And something else that you had mentioned too, was that they can communicate telepathically. This was like their primary form of communication. And something that was mentioned, and I thought this was so funny, I don't know if you heard me giggle, was that they would do both at the same time. They would verbally speak and telepathically communicate at the same time.
Yeah.
And I do this. You've actually caught me a couple of times where you're like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. My mom, because it's in my head, but it's also, you know, coming out my mouth, and like, or sometimes I'll be having a conversation with her and I'll just laugh or whatever.
Yes.
So you're mixing. So I thought that was really funny when they mentioned that, because I was like, I do that. I totally get that.
with that capability of being able to do that, you know, with their minds, their subconscious, and changing molecular structures and interfering with frequencies and vibrations of things, that now makes them able, they have hovercraft.
Right.
Okay. They have planes that have no engines.
Yeah.
No wings. They describe them as cigar shaped.
Yep. Yeah.
And they had some of these hovercraft could haul material as far as they needed for building.
Yep.
And this would require, depending on the payload, was dependent on how many people they needed focused on this particular task at hand. So you have this ability now to have a hovercraft. They talk about pathways that are like when you go to LAX, not the escalators, but the ones that are just...
that move you. You just stand on them and they move.
Yeah, the electric walkways.
Oh, electric walkways. Yeah.
They had those throughout the city that took you from one building to another, buildings that were 20 to 30 stories high.
Yeah. Wow. You want to know what's funny? When I was a kid, I would have sworn that the freeway was one of those moving things, like what you're just talking about. And I wonder if that's like past life, that I'm like, oh, I remember these walkways. Could
Maybe.
be. You never know.
Right.
I thought that for a long time.
So with their ability with the crystals and being able to do this is now they built their city and lined a lot of their buildings, if not solid block of crystal,
Right.
or they would line it with crystals. They could use the sun's energy and the moon's energy. So these crystal buildings were lit up
Yes.
at night. It took no power.
Yep, that's right.
No electricity.
Solar energy.
They were
Yep.
they were lit up by solar energy.
Yeah, through the crystals.
And again, the crystals. This is also something we discussed in our episode way back when about the pyramids and the involvement in crystals in that.
Yes.
I think for us now in this day and age, we kind of look at them as, oh, those are pretty rocks.
Yeah, we don't realize
they're
what they
not,
do.
You know.
Yeah, I know. We have a lot of pretty rocks too that probably have some pretty cool powers to them that we don't
Right.
even know. You know, but they did. They had. They knew how to use their crystals, and they used different crystals for different purposes. And they used their psychic abilities to help them medically as well. They did not have the medical issues that we have. When they would feel something was out of whack, they would psychically figure out what it is, and they would fix it with what they would eat and how
Yes.
they would take care of themselves. They were mostly vegetarians, but not like as dramatic as our vegetarians.
They're not like
it says.
vegan.
They're not
They would
vegan,
eat
yeah.
protein and only have meat when needed.
Yes, small amounts,
Yeah.
but mostly vegetables and high fiber foods. Let's see, what else did I write down? So medically, well, it said that they didn't live as long as we do now.
No.
And that's not because they were getting the same kind of like diseases. It's because the energy that it was taking for them to
Yes.
live like that in the human body was making the human body not last as
Yes.
long. So they were living like 40 to 50 years. But think about this. You're a spiritual being.
Right.
You know what I mean? You know what...
They said at that time also that the outskirts of Atlantis, other smaller civilizations, were living longer,
Yeah.
but they weren't living in this high energy field.
That's right. Yeah.
So something else that I found really interesting as far as the telepathic communication would go is that if an outsider was going to approach, I don't think I said this, but someone that didn't dwell in the city itself but was coming to visit, they would be warned telepathically. Like if they weren't coming of good nature and peace and you know what I mean?
They wouldn't come into this.
They would be warned, and they automatically, just out of their own instinct, would turn around.
Yep.
If you didn't have if you were coming from a totally pure place and peace and, you know, all that,
Yep.
then you wouldn't hear that.
Right.
You would be welcome to come in.
Right.
That's incredible. It's like a public service announcement,
Yeah.
but no
I
speakers
want that.
necessary.
Yeah. Where do I find this?
Please go away.
I want to know where I find this place that people use their psychic abilities.
Before somebody knocks on your door, please go away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, wait, don't do it. I want to live in Atlantis. I do.
Yeah.
Because at least the way we're describing it now.
Yes.
But we know that that's not the way it ended, because usually civilizations that are doing that well are not wiped out.
No.
Usually civilizations are wiped out because they have done something that they can't go back on. And this, when you listen to this in Dolores books, at least for me, it reminded me of what we're doing here right now.
That's, again, history repeating itself.
History repeating itself, because they just let their abilities go to their heads and they started being greedy. And honestly, I had to stop listening because they started talking about the different kinds of creatures.
They got into changing, basically creating their own animals.
Yeah, and it was kind of brutal, and
Right.
so I didn't listen to it.
It wasn't, the animals weren't good. They were sort of looked misfitish, but a lot of, again, legends and folklore type of stories. What's that? Centron or
I don't remember.
a centaur or minotaur, something, the half horse, half man.
Yeah.
These types of things. Basically, that's what Atlantis was doing.
Yeah.
They had gotten so good at this that they were trying to create like a servant.
Right, exactly.
And they wanted to see if they could do this, but also if they played tricks on each other, and kind of like where you would take over the body of an animal,
Right.
and be conscious within that animal and do things that aren't good. And then they were creating beings literally out of like they would sit with 3 of them in a room with a dog and make this dog's face turn into a human's face.
Yeah.
It's really hard to wrap your head around.
It really is, yeah.
But
It's energy.
let me take you to another book really quick of Dolores's, and that's Jesus and the Essenes, which we're going to do that one day.
Yeah.
Because it's a really good book.
Yeah.
But it talks about Christ after the crucifixion. And he's put into this tomb. And we're all going, how is the shroud, the cloth still there, but Christ is not?
Right. Yeah.
Okay? Because Christ, along with help from the other side, this was a way to wake people up, to start waking people up out of the post-Atlantis traumatic situation that blocked out all this ability and gifts.
Yeah, that was another thing. Yeah.
Okay, this happened for a reason. The reason why Atlantis was wiped out is because they were abusing these privileges,
Right.
these gifts, and Jesus was kind of the first step to come back and show us, you can do this,
Yeah.
but if you do it in good vein, you know?
Yep.
So he essentially, through molecular structure, or what we would call deconstruction, removes his body from that tomb.
Right.
And he's gone.
He's a demigod.
He's a demigod. He broke himself
it.
down
Yeah.
as quickly as possible, and he's gone.
Yep.
Okay? Whoever moved the stone, that wasn't Christ. Because once you're a spirit, you don't need to move a stone to leave a tomb.
No.
You're on your own at that point. So this is a very important connection to the Dolores kind of research, is that these people were doing things that now became cruel.
Yeah.
Became cruel to animals. They were tricking each other.
Yeah.
They had big arenas where they would create these animals. They were kind of left over
Yeah.
in search of making the perfect sort of servant. They were getting lazy, and they would fight these things in these arenas, sort of like the Romans.
Yeah.
Except these were creatures. And they were very specific in saying that they showed no emotion
Yeah.
in watching these things that were horrific.
Yeah.
They didn't scream, they didn't shout, they didn't cry, they didn't smile. They showed no emotion, but they watched.
Crazy.
And so this is the point now where, look at the comparison
Yeah.
to our society
have
and
been.
what we're messing with, both genetically and, molecularly, meaning we're splitting atoms,
Right.
and we're doing stuff that's very dangerous if it's not taken in the right hands. We've got chemical warfare that could break out, that everybody thinks, that's the next thing to happen. So
Right.
we're trying to play these demigod roles.
Right.
And that's where the universe is, I think, now here trying to show us that these things are real. They're not folklore. They're not legend.
Right.
They were
exactly.
passed down and they've lived on for a reason,
Yep.
to teach us something,
Yeah.
if not anything, about maybe what not to do
Yeah.
or repeat.
Yeah. I think it's hard for people to grasp the fact that, there can be a cataclysmic event that wipes out any civilization,
Yeah.
And you ask, why does that happen? And, my whole life, as well, growing up, at least for the first 30 years of my life, I expected God to come back and destroy the earth, because that's what was always talked about. He's just going to come back and he's going to wipe us all out.
Right.
But if you look at Atlantis, there were other civilizations that were not wiped out during that time. It was just Atlantis. This wasn't a end of the world type event.
Right.
This was a event that happened to take this particular civilization out. Whether it was a volcano or earthquake, whatever it was, do I believe that it was sent from God? that he just, destroyed everything. No, that's not how I look at it.
No.
I don't look at it like that at all.
No.
But I do believe that the civilization, it had to go because they were becoming really bad.
Yes.
And now, if you look at what's happening here now, like you said, there are similar things that are happening. And we are losing people every day. Tons of people every day. There's a mass exit of souls happening right now.
I agree.
And it's probably more than what was lost in Atlantis. So it's different because they were taken out by volcano, earthquakes, or whatever. But we have a lot of people that are being taken out by a virus. And you can ask yourself, why is this? Is it because we have to start over on certain things? Do you know what I mean? I believe that these are just natural events that happen in order to keep our system going the way that it's supposed to.
One thing that was really interesting to me in the story, too, about the telepathy and the way that this was so readily available, there was no machines that stored history or information.
Right.
Okay? Let me take that back. For some of the people that were more common people, there were machines there that were essentially for like your main information, stuff you kind of need to know right off the bat.
Right.
But they talk about this telepathy and this gift of being able to connect into this information, where it's housed, stored. And this goes back to that gentleman you shared, I don't remember his name, that was the video or the TikTok about the universe supplying this kind of informational highway.
I think that was Aaron Dowdy.
Yeah, it's not the internet, but it's this invisible informational highway that all of us are psychic beings. We're spirits, okay? We are gods. When we start to do crap like Atlantis and maybe some of the stuff we're doing nowadays with nuclear weapons and chemicals and all that, we're trying to be like demigods. But we are extensions of God.
Yeah.
But my point is that they were able to tap into this telepathically, this history.
Yes.
And knowledge of how to do things. And this wasn't by our own evolution.
Right.
There was help from other galaxies. There's a galactic community, essentially, that's working with the Earth to help it grow and continue to survive these cataclysmic events, because not all of them were like these situations, Atlantis, that people needed to be, people and technology needed to be wiped out because there was something wrong going on. You also had the fact that Earth is a living thing.
Yeah.
She's a rustling, stirring creature. Yeah. And the younger she was, the more volatile she was. She's calming because she's getting older, like all of us.
Yeah.
And she's settling. But so they had a lot of ability to tap into so much. They were talking about going back to some of those rocks, that they had rocks that they could make them light up.
Yeah.
They didn't have light bulbs.
Yeah.
So not just crystals, but they had actually rocks, stones that they would mount. And they said they would do it cleverly, like in a design way, where you'd have them in different sizes. These have been found in Central America. They're perfectly round stones. And most of the ones that have been found are pretty big.
Yeah.
But they would use one maybe the size of like a bowling ball to light up a room. Or they said they could line a wall with small, like 2-inch ones.
Yeah.
And then you would have like a line of light going around.
Very sophisticated.
Right. You're thinking, well, just like what you said, well, if they're so sophisticated, why does it look like Barney Rubble?
Yeah.
Barney and Betty Rubble's house. That's because they knew how to get into these objects.
Yeah.
How to manipulate them.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing kind of even going back to Jesus and the Essenes, where how do we explain how Jesus walked on water?
Right. Yeah.
How do we explain how he healed the sick by touching them?
Yep.
How do we explain how he made it, he fed starving people, thousands of them, when he had only little bits of food and made tons of food out of little bits of food?
Yeah.
He was a master at manipulating energy.
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. It's just manipulating energy and not manipulating in a bad way.
No. So what caused the downfall? We have a couple more minutes here. What caused this, right?
Yeah.
This what was the event that wiped, and literally in Plato's description, it was overnight.
Yeah, it was one day.
The city was underwater, overnight, gone.
Yeah.
In this special we were watching, where they're doing all these travelings around the world, they did have a pretty convincing sort of take on maybe sinkhole, because of the amount of seismic activity in that general area is great.
Yeah.
Like Greek islands and was it Black Sea?
Yeah.
I can't remember the other seas they were mentioning, but which at one point were part of the Atlantic.
Right.
Right? These just little coves have been created now, so they get new names and everything, but it's essentially part of the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
And so I was kind of interested in that. I mean, I can't exactly remember in Dolores's book what they talk about. I want to say they talked about volcanic activity.
Yeah.
But volcanic activity could create a sinkhole.
It could, yeah.
Because what's happening is it's heating up the earth above it to where it's just, there's nothing below it.
Yeah.
It's, it's all melted, molten rock, and it sinks.
Absolutely. And depending on what it's built on, too, I'm pretty sure that she said volcanoes and earthquakes. It was, that absolutely.
And a lot of that area in general is like limestone. Yeah. Which is very powdery, almost like will wash away or, scrape away real easy. Mm-hmm. So we're not talking about, the earth overnight did this. It just caused Atlantis overnight to sink. Exactly. But this has been sort of a thing that was probably building, and maybe it was even brought on a little quicker. Yeah. So what was going on, would stop. Yep. And so it's hard for me not to look at things like cloning animals in our modern age, and again, nuclear weapons, and
we shouldn't be messing with this stuff.
Pollution, and sending our junk and our threats and our attitude off this globe. Yeah. Right. I think once we reconnect with the true realities of this world and open our minds to being a little bit more peaceful of creatures, we can reunite with the galactic community. But right now, nobody really wants to have anything to do with us. No. But they will intervene. Like, they're really specific in this chapters too, where they're saying, if man doesn't come to its senses and start to realize those things are true, and that there's a much more going on here, they're going to intervene.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're going to start nudging us to show us. And I think that's why you start to see some of this phenomena, like, what is this and what's going on? And, are we supposed to be paying attention to something here?
Right, for sure. But, no, I agree. Yeah. Absolutely. No.
So it's incredible. It's a really mind-bending, but it's... Yeah. I don't believe for a second that it's fiction.
I don't either.
I don't believe for a second.
No, there's so many possibilities of things that we just have no idea. And I just like to keep my...
what's sad, too, is like, what do we say in 5,000 more years when the pyramids finally fall? Right. And are buried in 1,000 more tons of sand? Oh, it was fiction?
Oh, yeah. Or there'll always be tombs to people. They've never found a body in a pyramid before, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. And they did say in this that these structures, including Atlantis and Egypt, the pyramids, are all they're built to line up with certain parts of our galaxy.
Yeah, we could do an episode on that.
Pyramids were meant to line up with the belt of Orion. I believe Atlantis was meant to line up with the sun.
I'm not sure.
I can't remember. But through cataclysmic events, some of the alignments get jacked up. Right. The pyramids have not moved. Yeah. They're still perfectly aligned, which means their power and their energy, if can be figured out, would still function.
Yeah. That's wild.
Wouldn't that be a minute? Somebody will hit them like, hey, I found the switch. Oh my God, these things light up.
Wouldn't that be awesome?
So, anyways, but that's good.
Yeah. Anyways, well, that was fun.
Good job, babe.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah. I like learning about these things, Yeah,
the possibilities. I hope that people get a little bit intrigued by it and maybe want to poke around themselves and inquire. Yeah, it's always sure. That's one thing they do talk about in this chapters too, is they want us to think about these things.
Yes,
They
sure.
want us to ponder what are our capabilities
Yeah, they do.
as a species.
Yep.
Because when we do that, then more is revealed and you become more advanced.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it's cool.
Yay.
Well, before we say goodbye, would you like to share your page?
Yes, you can find me on the web at SamanthaJonesPsychicMedium.com. If you'd like to reach us at the show, our email is spiritualjoneses@gmail.com, and you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at spiritualjoneses.
Very good.
And for you?
Yes, for my art, djonesartcollection.com for the web, at djonesartcollection for Facebook and Instagram. And for the music, gypsybrown.com for the web, at Gypsy Brown Band for Facebook, at Gypsy Brown Music for Instagram. And thanks again for everybody for the support and the love. If you want to know about more shows, listen here, follow us on those pages I just mentioned, and you'll get to hear more.
Yay. So exciting.
Yay. Well, we hope everybody got something out of this.
That we do.
I did. I love talking about that stuff.
Me too.
And we hope everybody has a great week.
Yes, we do.
Until next week.
Peace and love.